It was a day everyone in the small town would remember. The wedding of Emma Carter and Daniel Brooks was the event of the year. People had spoken about it for months, admiring the couple's beautiful love story. Emma was known for her kindness, always smiling and helping others. Daniel was respected, a successful businessman with a charming personality. Their families had been waiting for this day with great excitement. The wedding took place in a stunning countryside villa surrounded by blooming gardens, tall oak trees, and distant rolling hills. The setting was perfect. White chairs lined the green grass, soft music filled the air, and every detail seemed carefully planned to create a magical moment. Emma walked down the aisle in an elegant white gown that shimmered in the sunlight, while Daniel waited for her with a calm but joyful look. Their vows were heartfelt, their promises genuine. Guests were moved to tears, believing they had witnessed something truly special. As the ceremony ended, the couple was showered with petals, and the celebrations began. The reception hall was decorated with glowing lights and soft white drapes. Laughter and music filled the room as guests enjoyed their meals, clinked their glasses, and shared stories about Emma and Daniel. There was dancing, cake cutting, and endless photos to capture the happiness of the night. Emma and Daniel appeared deeply in love, often holding hands, stealing glances, and whispering to each other throughout the evening. They looked like they were ready to begin a wonderful life together. Everything seemed perfect, but life was about to take a sharp, unexpected turn. As the night grew late and guests started to leave, Emma quietly slipped away from the reception. It wasn't unusual for a bride to take a moment for herself, perhaps to catch her breath or fix her makeup. But when she didn't return after a while, Daniel went looking for her. He searched the hallways, the gardens, the nearby parking lot, but Emma was nowhere to be found. At first, Daniel thought she might have gone to their bridal suite, but when he checked, the room was empty. Concern slowly turned into panic. Friends and family joined the search, calling her name and checking every possible corner of the villa. No one had seen her leave the building, and none of the staff noticed anything strange. Daniel's car, which was parked near the exit, was also missing. It was the car they had planned to use to leave the next morning for their honeymoon. The sudden disappearance of both Emma and the vehicle didn't make sense. The police were quickly called, and the villa was locked down to prevent anyone from leaving until a proper search was completed. Officers questioned guests and employees, checked security cameras, and carefully examined the surroundings. Hours passed, but there was no trace of Emma. Friends tried to comfort Daniel, but his mind raced with confusion and fear. Where could Emma have gone? Did she leave on her own? Was she in danger? Nothing fit. The couple had appeared happy all day. There were no fights, no signs of cold feet, and no reason for Emma to vanish on the happiest night of her life. As the night stretched into morning, the police realized this was not a simple case of a missing bride. Something much darker had happened. Something that would pull everyone into a story filled with secrets, lies, and a disappearance that no one could explain. The wedding that was meant to be a beginning had suddenly turned into a chilling mystery. Following morning brought no answers, only deeper confusion. Police officers, search teams, and worried family members continued to comb through the villa and the surrounding countryside. Every path, every hidden corner, and every nearby road was searched carefully, but Emma had simply vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no abandoned belongings, and no suspicious footprints leading away from the venue. The only clue was that Daniel's car, a dark blue sedan, was missing. Some believed Emma might have taken it herself, but others found it hard to believe she would leave so suddenly on her wedding night without telling anyone. The idea didn't make sense to those who knew her. By mid-morning, a call came in from a farmer who had noticed an unfamiliar car parked along a quiet wooded area nearly 20 miles from the wedding venue. The police rushed to the scene. The car matched the description of Daniel's missing vehicle. It was parked awkwardly on the side of a dirt path, half covered in dust as if it had been sitting there all night. There were no visible fingerprints, no damage, and the keys were missing. The car seemed untouched from the outside, but when officers opened the trunk, they were met with a shocking sight. Daniel was inside, his hands and feet bound tightly with rope, a cloth stuffed in his mouth to prevent him from calling for help. Daniel was quickly pulled from the trunk. He was pale, shaking, and severely dehydrated. Paramedics attended to him on the spot, and once he was stable, the police began asking questions. Daniel was in a state of shock. He told investigators that after Emma disappeared, he went looking for her near the parking lot. That was the last thing he remembered clearly. He said he had been hit from behind and lost consciousness immediately. When he woke up, he was trapped in the trunk, unable to move or call out. He had no idea how he got there or how his car ended up so far from the villa. What disturbed the investigators most was the timeline. If Daniel had been attacked right after Emma disappeared, then who had driven the car all the way to the remote spot? And more importantly, where was Emma? There was no sign she had been in the car. No hair, no pieces of her wedding dress, no personal belongings. It was as if she had vanished before Daniel was attacked. The police also noted that Daniel's wedding ring was missing from his finger, and his phone was gone, which made the situation even more confusing. Had someone taken them on purpose? Was this meant to send a message? Officers returned to the villa and carefully reviewed the security camera footage. At first, everything appeared normal. Emma was seen walking out of the reception hall alone. She moved towards the parking area, but then the footage suddenly cut off. The next part was missing. Hours of recordings had vanished from the system, leaving a strange gap at the exact time Emma disappeared. It was quickly clear that someone had intentionally deleted the footage. Someone with access and knowledge of the system had tampered with it to hide what really happened. The discovery changed the direction of the investigation. This was no accident or misunderstanding. Someone had carefully planned these events, someone who knew the villa well enough to erase security footage and move unnoticed. Emma's disappearance and Daniel's attack were not random. They were connected, but the reasons remained hidden. The police realized they were dealing with something much more complex, a crime carefully executed by a person who was always one step ahead. The celebration that had begun with joy was now a dark and tangled mystery, with the bride still missing and no clear path to finding her. As investigators pushed deeper into the case, strange details began to surface, adding more layers to the already troubling mystery. When they checked Emma's phone records, they discovered a series of anonymous text messages sent to her in the weeks leading up to the wedding. The messages were short but direct, all carrying the same warning: not to trust Daniel. Some messages even told her to cancel the wedding immediately. The number was untraceable, and whoever sent the messages had used a disposable phone, that vanished shortly after the last message was delivered. Emma never mentioned these warnings to her friends or family. She kept them hidden, perhaps believing they were a cruel prank, or maybe she was too afraid to share them. As police continued to investigate, they began to look more closely into Daniel's past. His story of being attacked and left in the trunk seemed suspicious to some officers. It was difficult to understand how someone could overpower him so easily and move the car without being seen. When detectives explored Daniel's history, they uncovered something unexpected. Less than a year before his engagement to Emma, Daniel had been in a serious relationship with another woman named Claire Evans. She had disappeared suddenly, with no clear explanation, and her family had eventually assumed she had left the area by choice. At the time, there had been no signs of foul play, and Claire's disappearance had been quickly closed as a missing person case without further investigation. But now, with Emma missing under mysterious circumstances, the connection to Claire's sudden disappearance could no longer be ignored. When the police contacted Claire's family, they learned that she had worked at the same countryside villa where Emma and Daniel's wedding had taken place. She was familiar with the location, the security systems, and the staff. A former villa employee confirmed seeing Claire argue with Daniel in the weeks before she vanished. It wasn't just a casual disagreement, it had seemed intense and emotional. The villa staff remembered that shortly after the argument, Claire stopped showing up for work, and no one heard from her again. This revelation placed a dark cloud over Daniel's version of events. Investigators questioned him again, pressing him about his relationship with Claire. Daniel admitted they had been together, but insisted they broke up months before she went missing. He claimed not to have seen her since, saying that Claire had become distant and eventually cut all ties with him. Still, the timing of her disappearance now seemed far from random. Police started to wonder if Daniel's past relationship might have something to do with Emma's sudden vanishing. The more they looked into Daniel's life, the more inconsistencies they found. He had failed to mention that Claire had once worked at the villa, and he couldn't explain why Emma had received the threatening messages warning her against marrying him. His silence on these details cast a long shadow of doubt. Friends of Emma told investigators that she had appeared stressed and distracted in the days leading up to the wedding. She had been glancing over her shoulder, seemed unusually quiet, and even asked one of her close friends whether people can really change, or if the past always finds a way to return. These small but significant details painted a picture of fear and hesitation. Emma may have known something or suspected something, but chose to continue with the wedding, perhaps hoping it was all in her mind. Now she was gone, Daniel was a victim, and Claire's past disappearance was resurfacing in the most chilling way. The threads of this story were starting to connect, but the truth remained just out of reach, hidden by careful planning and unanswered questions. The investigation took a sudden turn when detectives managed to recover the missing security footage. After carefully tracing the data, they discovered that the deleted files had been moved to an external storage drive connected to the villa's security system. It appeared that someone with detailed knowledge of the system had extracted the footage and attempted to hide it. When the recovered video was finally viewed, it exposed a truth more terrifying than anyone expected. The footage showed Emma walking toward the parking lot late that night, just as guests were beginning to leave. Waiting near Daniel's car was a woman wearing a maintenance uniform, her face partially hidden under a cap. As Emma approached, the woman quickly stepped forward and pulled out a small weapon. Emma appeared shocked but did not resist. She was forced into the car, and within seconds, they both disappeared from the camera's view. The woman's movements were calm, quick, and carefully planned. When investigators paused the footage to get a clearer look at the woman's face, they realized it was Claire Evans. The woman everyone thought had disappeared nearly a year ago was not missing at all. She had been watching, waiting, and planning. The discovery shattered everything. Claire had faked her disappearance and had carefully followed Daniel's life ever since, staying in the shadows, gathering information, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Investigators pieced together that Claire had been sending the threatening messages to Emma in the weeks before the wedding, trying to scare her away. When that failed, Claire put her final plan into action. She staged Emma's kidnapping and attacked Daniel, leaving him locked in the trunk as a cruel message. Further examination revealed that Claire had used her former position at the villa to access the security system, delete the critical footage, and move without raising suspicion. She knew the layout, the blind spots, and the timing. Everything had been executed with precision. Claire's plan was not to kill Daniel, but to leave him broken, to destroy him in the most personal way. She wanted him to live with the memory of what happened, never knowing where Emma had gone. Detectives searched for Claire everywhere. They visited her old apartment, checked travel records, and monitored airports and border crossings. But Claire had vanished again, just as carefully as before. She left no trace, no digital footprints, and no signs of where she might have taken Emma. The search grew larger, but every lead ended in silence. A closer look at Claire's life before her disappearance showed that she had become obsessed with Daniel after their breakup. Friends described her as emotionally unstable, growing increasingly fixated on Daniel's happiness after their relationship ended. She followed him from a distance, watched him rebuild his life, and quietly waited as he fell in love with Emma. Claire had spent months studying Emma's routines, gaining access to the villa long before the wedding, and creating a plan that would tear Daniel's world apart. The weight of guilt settled on Daniel. Though he insisted he had no part in Claire's scheme, the evidence suggested his past had drawn this nightmare to Emma. He was left to wonder whether his earlier choices had unknowingly sealed Emma's fate. The police continued to search, but with Claire missing and no new clues, the case began to grow cold. What had begun as the happiest night of Daniel's life had turned into a haunting mystery. The perfect wedding was now the center of a twisted revenge story that left the bride missing, the groom shattered, and a question that no one could answer. Where was Emma, and what had Claire done with her? Daniel's life slowly unraveled in the weeks that followed. Each morning, he woke up hoping for news, some small update that would lead him to Emma. But every day passed with the same cold silence. The police worked tirelessly at first, sending search teams into nearby woods, following dead-end tips, and tracing credit card activity that led nowhere. Friends who had once celebrated with him at the wedding began to distance themselves, unsure how to comfort him, unsure how much to believe. Daniel's family, though supportive, couldn't hide their own doubts. Some whispered quietly that perhaps he knew more than he claimed. The weight of suspicion hung around him like a shadow that never lifted. The media seized on the story. Headlines painted Daniel as both a victim and a possible suspect, flipping between sympathy and doubt. News vans parked near his home, reporters called his phone day and night, and photos of Emma in her wedding dress became the face of a case that the public couldn't forget. As weeks stretched into months, theories multiplied. Some believed Emma had run away willingly, unable to face the truth about Daniel's past. Others insisted Claire had killed her and escaped to another country under a false identity. And then, there were those who thought Daniel himself was the architect of it all, a man who had carefully staged his own attack to cover a far more sinister plan. The truth remained buried beneath layers of speculation, and Daniel could do nothing but watch as his life crumbled around him. Behind the scenes, the police quietly began to shift their attention. Without new evidence, without sightings of Claire, and with no trace of Emma, resources were pulled away. The case became another file in a growing stack of unresolved disappearances. Daniel hired private investigators, desperate to keep the search alive, but even they reached dead ends. One of them, an older man who had worked missing persons cases for decades, sat Daniel down and explained it in simple words. Whoever had taken Emma had planned this for a long time. It wasn't random, it wasn't rushed. It was the work of someone who knew how to disappear, someone who had removed every possible clue. Still, Daniel refused to let go. He retraced every step of his relationship with Claire, revisited places they had been, reread old messages, and studied photographs, looking for some overlooked detail that might lead him to her. He kept thinking back to the days before the wedding when Emma had seemed unsettled, when she had asked strange questions about trust, about whether people could truly leave their past behind. He remembered the way she looked at him on their wedding day, smiling but with something hidden in her eyes, something that now seemed like quiet fear. One night, long after the police had stopped calling, Daniel sat alone in his living room, scanning through old wedding photos stored on a flash drive. The images had become painful to look at, but he searched anyway, needing to feel close to Emma. He clicked through each frame until he stopped at one that seemed ordinary at first. Emma was standing with a group of friends near the reception entrance, laughing, her dress shining in the evening light. But in the background, just beyond the crowd, there was a figure, a woman partially turned away, wearing a cap and a plain uniform. The face was blurry, but the posture, the height, and the hair were familiar. Daniel felt his chest tighten. It was Claire. She had been at the wedding all along, blending in among the staff, watching them as they celebrated. Daniel sent the photo to the police immediately, but the response was lukewarm. The image was not clear enough to prove anything. They had already concluded that Claire was responsible. But for Daniel, this was confirmation. She had been there from the start. He began to wonder how deep her plan went. Had she been there for weeks, preparing, watching? Had she spoken to Emma before that night, planting seeds of fear and doubt? Driven by obsession, Daniel returned to the villa on his own, walking through the empty reception hall, the garden, and the parking lot where Emma had last been seen. The place was quiet now, booked only occasionally for smaller events. He spoke to the new staff, hoping someone might recall something unusual from that night, but no one had answers. He checked the security system, which had long since been replaced. The memories of that night clung to every corner of the villa, but none of them offered the tea.